Story 1, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I have no idea how that even got a cartoon adaptation. Story 2, Street Sharks was similar to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles but legally distinct. Story 3, Brave Star. It was a science fiction western mashup with a superpowered Native American marshal. Peak 1980s. Story 4, Hong Kong Phooey. Story 5, Eek the Cat was my favorite show, but hardly anyone seems to talk about it. Story 6, Adventures of the Gummy Bears. I still have the theme song memorized. Story 7, Tailspin. I know many people watched it, but people in my life do not remember it. I am a pilot and was talking about it with coworkers who looked at me as if I had two heads when I mentioned Jungle Book bears flying planes. Story 8, Mighty Mouse. When I was little, I loved him and thought everybody knew who he was. But when I looked it up as an adult, it seems there was only ever an episode or two. Edit/update. I think I only ever saw the Wolf episode and one other on a compilation tape. It sounds like they were part of the early theatrical release. I had no idea it actually had such a rich and extensive history after that. I'm surprised but excited to see that it was so influential. Nobody I have ever asked in person has heard of him, so it is nice to hear about all the people who have. Story 9, Dungeons and Dragons. Got up at 8 on Saturday mornings for that one, and I loved it. Star Blazers was really good too. Story 10, Danger Mouse. I cannot figure out why more people have not seen it. Story 11. Not sure how niche it is, but I never hear anyone talk about it like they do the rest of their cartoons. That being said, Word Girl is a public broadcasting service kids show about a girl with superpowers who defeats villains using her superhuman strength and vocabulary. Story 12. The Weekenders. Every episode covered a single weekend and was excellent. Feels like I imagined it. Story 13. Pirates of Darkwater. Edit. Holy hell, I did not realize other people actually watched this. Literally nobody I have ever met has remembered this show. Thank you all for letting me know I did not have some long-term hallucinations of a cartoon show as a kid. Edit 2. Thanks for the award. I had no idea all the time spent pretending to be Run as a small child would one day lead me here. Story 14. Cops was a fun science fiction cartoon. Story 15. I don't know that they are niche, but I loved Ghost Rider, Wishbone, and So Weird when I was a kid. Edit. Just rewatched the pilot of Ghost Rider and Samuel L. Jackson plays a dad to one of the kid detectives. Story 16. Fievel's American Tales. 13 episodes aired between September and December 1992, featuring the Little Mouse family from An American Tale and Fievel Goes West. I have a vivid memory of this and remember feeling crushed when I got up to watch it one Saturday morning, and it was no longer on television. Story 17. I've never met a single person who used to watch Pirates of Dark Waters. Story 18. Cablum. Whenever I bring it up, no one ever knows what I am talking about. Story 19. There was a show called Josie and the Pussycats that I really liked. It seemed to be an offshoot of Scooby-Doo. Story 20. Not when I was a child. I saw it in college, but Mission Hill definitely deserved to be more popular. Story 21. Darkwing Duck and Gargoyles. Gargoyles really impressed me as a kid. Story 22. Reboot. Edit. It is a Canadian show, and I am shocked it was shown in the United States. Story 23. The Busy World of Richard Scarry came on around Little Bear and Blue's Clues, I think. It was my favorite Nickelodeon Junior show, but many people remember the other two I mentioned more. Not sure if it counts as a Nickelodeon Junior show, but that is how I remember it. Story 24. Exo Squad. Space Marines in mech suits fighting aliens who were also in mech suits. I had a few of the toys. They were fun. The characters were a little smaller than G.I. Joe figures, but the suits were quite large. I watched the show before school in 5th grade. It aired right before or after Wienerville, which I loved too. This was around 1994 to 1995. Story 25. The Mysterious Cities of Gold. Native children with a giant golden condor plane outrunning the conquistadors in the jungles of Central and South America. It was a great introduction to the history of the area. I tried showing it to my nephews, but they did not understand it. Story 26. Freakzoid. Jackie Chan Adventures. Code Lyoko. Also, I feel like many watch Doug. However, no one ever talks about Doug, and I feel like others in my generation did not really watch it for some reason. I loved it though. How did I forget Inspector Gadget? Wild Thornberrys. I know it was part of Cablum, however, Prometheus and Bob was my favorite. Story 27. I watched Robotech as a kid back in the 1980s and loved it. I rewatched the series earlier this year and was shocked at just how violent it is. Surprising since it was advertised as a children's show. Story 28. The Get Along Gang and Shirt Tales. Every now and then, I get the Get Along Gang theme song stuck in my head out of nowhere and it stays for days. You're welcome. Story 29. The Snorks. I loved that show. Seeing the years it aired is confusing. I did not think I was that young. Story 30. There was a cartoon of the Mummy, so that one for sure. Beetlejuice as well. Story 31. Being from the United States, Danger Mouse was not watched by any of my friends or siblings. Story 32. Bananas in Pajamas is an Australian children's television series. The series follows the adventures of two anthropomorphic bananas, B1 and B2, who wear blue and white striped pajamas. They live next to the beach with their friends, the teddy bears Amy, Lulu, and Morgan. The show features fun, educational stories aimed at preschool children. It originally aired on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Story 33. I used to watch Courage the Cowardly Dog religiously, and I swear no one else fully appreciated how weirdly terrifying and yet hilarious it was. Or the super obscure Real Monsters. Did anyone else really see that? Or was it just me questioning why a three-headed monster needed to go to monster school? Story 34. Captain Planet. A group of kids could summon an environmental superhero to save the day with their element rings. Sharky and George, detectives of the sea. Johnny Quest. Story 35. Fraggle Rock gave me nightmares because of the flooded basement episode. I am convinced this is a unique experience because no one knows what I am talking about, at least no one my age. I am 19, and I believe this show was either not very popular in 2000 or was a 90s niche puppet show. Story 36. It is funny to think that in this case, the comment with the fewest upvotes will be the most correct answer. Story 37. Bionic 6 was an American animation series at the end of many 1980s science fiction shows, such as Silverhawks, He-Man, and Thundercats, and just before or around shows like Centurions. It featured an adopted family structure with everyone being bionically enhanced. It had a memorable theme song that included a spoken introduction to explain the premise, as many shows did at the time. The animation quality was not great, but the concept and costume design for the family were interesting. The mother character was attractive. The father resembled Reed Richards with salt and pepper gray-brown hair. The family included an Asian child, an African-American child, a blonde child who looked like Boom Boom with the personality of Jubilee, both characters from the X-Men comics, and another child whose details are unclear. The show aired on the Science Fiction Channel at around 6 a.m. on Saturdays for a long time, right before Ronin Warriors. I used to wake up at 5 a.m. to watch unsubtitled original Japanese Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z on an Asian programming channel. Story 38. Technoman Blade, Samurai Pizza Cats. Edit. Just thought of a few more: Mobile Armored Strike Command, Voltron, Ronin Warriors, Transfer Z, Mega Man, RoboCop, Dino Riders. Story 39. There was a show called Noozles on Nickelodeon in the late 1980s that I remember finding much more interesting than most kids' cartoons at the time. It had an ongoing story, which was rare then. I found out years later that it was actually an anime. Similarly, around the same time, there was an old dub of the original Dragon Ball series that used to air very early on school days. Goku was named Zero for some reason, and there were several other unusual name changes. Story 40. Belle and Sebastian is about a little boy and his Great Pyrenees dog. Davy and Goliath is a claymation show on the religious channel about a boy and his dog, Goliath. Story 41. I swear no one I personally knew watched Winnie the Pooh. Some had merchandise, yes, but nobody watched the actual show or movies. Story 42. Babur and the Adventures of Bedu, one of my favorites as a kid. Story 43, Wacky Races. It is always funny to watch Dick Dastardly's cheating attempts backfire. Story 44, Silverhawks and Visionaries. They both had such cool toys too. The 1980s had amazing cartoon and toy synergy. Story 45, Highlander, the animated series. I loved it, but I have never met anyone else who has heard of it. Story 46. I do not think I have ever met another person who remembers Kissifer. Story 47. Biker Mice from Mars. No one else in the United Kingdom seems to remember it. Story 48. I have seen many cartoons mentioned here, but did anyone else see The Toxic Crusaders? It was a strange children's cartoon spin-off of an extremely graphic and not child-friendly movie series. It was great and I loved it. Story 49. I do not think people talk about the Creepy Crawlers cartoon very much. Story 50, Mysterious Cities of Gold. I never see anyone talk about it. Story 51, Beverly Hills Teens. I really wanted that limousine with the pool in it. Story 52. Has anyone seen Hammerman? MC Hammer's short-lived cartoon? Story 53, SWAT Cats. I don't know anyone who has seen it. Ronin Warriors is in second place. Story 54, Redwall. I think the show was possibly called Tales of Redwall. It was about woodland animal characters living together in an abbey, often attacked by villainous vermin. The books were fairly popular, but no one ever discusses the show or movie. Story 55. My absolute top two were Muppet Babies and Tiny Toons. Darkwing Duck, Tailspin, and DuckTales would round out the top 5 of my young childhood. Story 56. Don't think I have seen these yet. Gummy Bears, Trollkins, The Littles, Rainbow Bright, and the Pound Puppies. I am clearly dating myself with these. Story 57. Fern Gully is a cartoon movie about fairies that was overshadowed by others at that time. I am a straight man, but I loved those fairies. Story 58. Johnny Quest or Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Space Ghost was good times, man. Story 59. Challenge of the GoBots. I liked this show better than Transformers. Story 60. Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea. Ulysses 31. Kid Video. Pole Position. Botmaster. Starcom. Brave Star. Spiral Zone. Silverhawks. Bionic 6. Dino Riders. Centurions. Visionaries. Sky Commanders. Galaxy Rangers. Jace and the Wheeled Warriors. Defenders of the Earth. G-Force. Exo Squad. Tigus Harks. Dino Saucers. Story 61. Not a cartoon, but Lance Link. Secret Chimp. It must have been one of those ideas dreamed up while the creative team was under the influence. The show used live-action, trained chimpanzees wearing human clothes to perform a spy show like The Man from UNCLE or I Spy. It had everything. The main character was called Lance Link. His counterpart, the femme fatale spy, was Mata Hari, and the chief of the agency was Darwin. The agency was the agency to prevent evil. Story 62. There was a video series called Little People. There were only 6 tapes, and for a long time they were considered lost media. Story 63. Not me when my children were young. I loved watching Pinky and the Brain with my sons. Story 64. Earthworm Jim. There was a lot of focus on Earthworm Jim. It had already been canceled when I discovered it in the late 1990s, so I had to make do with the few episodes that were released on VHS. They were excellent and had an immense impact on my sense of humor that I will always be thankful for. Story 65. Not really niche, but Daria. I feel like many people have never heard of it. It is excellent. Story 66. Thank God somebody mentioned Street Sharks, Biker Mice from Mars, and Samurai Pizza Cats. About a month ago, I went to my parents' house and found a box from my childhood. Inside, I discovered my Vinny and his rocket-powered crotch rocket action figure, which now lives on my shelf in my house. Story 67. Thunder the Barbarian. Part Conan, part Star Wars. All awesome. The Herculoids were also great. Story 68. The Secret World of Alex Mack. Eureka's Castle. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Story 69, Kissifer. No way anyone else saw that. 1985 to 1986 upstate New York area. Not sure if it was local. Story 70. Braceface is about a vegetarian teenager whose electrified braces allow her to eavesdrop on conversations. Also, Angelina Ballerina is a very cute children's show with lots of whimsy about a young mouse who does ballet. Story 71. Peanut Butter and Jelly Otter. The show aired on Disney in the late 1990s. I probably watched it because my mom babysat little kids or a younger sibling was born around that time. That might be why I have never met anyone my age or older who has heard of it. Story 72. All my favorites have already been mentioned, but I didn't see any love for the adventures of the Gummy Bears. I haven't gone back and tried to rewatch it, so I have no idea if it holds up like Gargoyles and Batman. The animated series did, but my siblings and I loved watching the Gummy Bears. The theme song was fun too. Gummy Bears. Bouncing here and there and everywhere. Story 73. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. An animated version of the story that was dubbed and re-aired on the public broadcasting service. Story 74. Tailspin is one I have a hard time finding people who have seen. It was a favorite. So were Thundercats, Heathcliff, and Conan the Adventurer. Story 75. Not as a child, but my child watched Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and I am shocked at how many people have not heard of it. My child is now 25, and I still watch the show on my own. Story 76. Noozles. It was about a little girl who lives in Australia and made friends with a magical flying koala. Then they travel through Ayers Rock to Koalawallaland, where they have to fight the bad koalas who are Nazis flying biplanes. Story 77. The Completely Misadventure of Ed Grimley was a Saturday Night Live skit. Story 78. Mask, which was like a G.I. Joe and Transformers amalgam. Widget, a purple creature that could shapeshift. The Wuzzles, humanoid chimeras like a bee lion, thematically akin to Care Bears. Story 79. Mummies Alive. Men in Black animated series. Bruno the Kid. The Mask animated series. Hysteria. Story 80. The Max, on Music Television's Oddities. No one ever knows about it. I watched it in high school. So good. Story 81. Feels like Ned's Newt is something that gets me some raised eyebrows. Story 82. You can easily determine a person's age group by their answers. Story 83. Wonder Twins powers activate. Shape of a bald eagle. Form of a pool of water. Story 84. Heckle and Jekyll. I am quite sure it is very offensive. Not acceptable. Story 85. I have a movie and a show to share. For the movie, Disney's The Black Cauldron was a favorite of mine growing up. Whenever I talked to people about it, they often had no idea it even existed. That still happens to this day. For the show, it would be Code Lyoko. I know this was a fairly popular show, but it seems like it's hit or miss whether people actually know it. Story 86. As a child in the 1970s, I loved Shmoo. I feel like I am the only one who remembers it. Story 87. Going to throw this one out there: Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain. A very bad idea that also did not last long. Story 88. Not a cartoon, but a show called Zoobly Zoo. The theme song and the live-action characters were memorable. Story 89. Tales from the Crypt. The Crypt Keeper was a good guy, and so were the other monsters. Story 90. Gumby. Not that niche, but I do not personally know anyone who watched it who is my age or younger, which is 31. Story 91. Reboot. I am confident it was a Canadian show. It was on the cutting edge of computer graphics. The story was about digital beings that lived inside a computer. Story 92. As Told by Ginger. It aired on Teen Nick and was a show targeted toward girls. However, the characters developed over time, the topics were mature, and many episodes were Emmy-worthy. Story 93. Denver the Last Dinosaur and David the Gnome. No one ever understands what I am talking about when I mention either one. Story 94. Kid Video. I remember watching it for a couple of years when we lived in Arizona around the mid-1980s. The cartoon was about a band, and the villain was called Master Blaster. They would show one real, current music video at some point during the episode. The one video I remember is Billy Idol's Eyes Without a Face. I have never heard anyone else talk about this cartoon. Story 95, The Mighty Hercules. Theme song here. Story 96. Bucky O'Hare was the closest we ever got to a Star Fox cartoon back then. Story 97. I have scrolled many posts and have not seen anyone say Super Ted yet. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.